I wanted to travel light, left my knife laying right there, said to myself, I'll never need it. Boy, that was a mistake. I left my knife laying there, went out and got old Dan, and started out. I got back in on the mountain, and right where Jim had put me on that stand, when I looked down and saw that bear coming, right along there, Dan began to wind. And I noticed he was sticking his nose in the air and winding, and of course the air's coming in this direction, see. And I was wondering, I wonder what old Dan wind. I went out a little further, and there's some snow on that side of the mountain, see. Now that's the north side. Now over again the other side of the mountain, there where the sun hits, there is no snow, see. And I walked out a little further, and I saw this bobcat track. And I thought, now maybe he was winning that bobcat, you see. Went out to the end of the ridge, Jack, and trying to make up my mind whether to drop off to the right onto the river or drop down in this hollow. And old Dan was sitting there beside of me with his head turned, looking down that way, still winding. And I thought, I'll just go that way. Now, old Dan's introducing something down there. I'll just go that way. And Jack, I just dropped down off of the ridge, and there's sort of a little flat-like, and then you drop on down off of the mountain. And when I got down on that little flat-like, I stopped. And Dan sat down right beside of me, and his body was against this left leg, and I could just feel that dog trembling inside. And there's a squirrel took off running there, and I said to myself, now old Dan wouldn't be excited over that squirrel. And just at that time, out went that bear. That bear had been laying under a treetop there that had blown down. And the bear took off to my left. And when he did, I had Dan on a chain, you see. I dropped it and stepped on it to hold him and swung around and fired once. And then there's a big rock. And when the bear came out from the other side of the rock, I fired again. And he turned to
missed him
run back
both times.
the same way. Well, I allowed that I did, see. And when he turned and run back the same way, I fired number 3. But only got 4, Jack. And I better keep this 4th one, you see. And I reached down and unsnapped old Dan. And when I unsnapped him, he took off after that bear. And the last I saw, man, he was just reaching for that bear, going down over the next flat. And I grabbed up the chain and run out and seen blood on the snow. So I knew I hit him.
Yeah.
And evidently, Jack, the second shot is what hit him, and that's what turned him around and started him back down. So I run down over the mountain, and I couldn't hear Dan at all barking. I just stayed on their tracks and took off the mountain as hard as I'd go. And Jack, I got down next to the foot of the mountain, and I could hear old Dan a barking tree over again the other side. He had crossed the creek and over on the other side. So I run on down, and when I could look across the hollow, Jack, there was that old bear. And he was holding again the side of a tree. And I thought to myself, man, I can't miss that.
That's a perfect shot.
Oh, yes. And
how far away was it, do you think?
I would say, 120, maybe 130 yards, no more than that, across the hollow, you see.
Yeah.
And Jack, I'm really not that bad a shot now. I'm not bragging. But I don't miss them that often now. And I knew that was my bear. And Jack, I put the crosshairs on that bear's shoulder and pulled the trigger. That gun went off, and that bear never moved. I lowered the gun waiting on him to drop, and he never dropped. And I said to myself, preacher, you missed that bear. Jack, I totally missed him. I don't know how in the world that I ever missed him, but I did. I managed to do it. I had no more shells. Now I was excited, to say the least. And evidently, Jack, I'm going to make an excuse for myself now. Evidently running
Here we go.
Okay. Like the big ones that get away, you know. Right. Running down off of that mountain, of course, made me tired and panting. And evidently, I must have just pulled off enough that I missed that bear.
Yeah.
Now, it was in my mind to put my gun against that tree there and take off, you see. I thought that's what I did. But when I finally found that gun, after looking for it for 20 minutes, I found it down there by the creek leaning up against a rock. That's how excited I was. What I was going to do was lean up against a tree, take off and run and get down to the tree where the bear was, you see. Well, when I got down there, got this side of the creek, Dan jumped the creek over on my side. He left the bear. And I said, Dan, get back there and get him. Go on, boy, get him. He's getting away. I jumped the creek, up the bank. And I'm looking for the bear, and the bear is gone. As soon as Dan left the tree, the bear come down and took off. Well, old Dan got after him, run him out around the mountain, and there was a black birch tree that had a lot of limbs coming out, and there was that bear up in that black birch tree. Dan treed him in that tree. So I run out, I look up in the tree, and there's that bear, and I said, Dan, we has got ourselves a bar, boy, if we can just get him killed.
That's it. But you had a way to kill him.
Jack, I'm telling you this.
What do you do? Well,
I'm standing there wondering how in the world I'm going to kill that bear, and nothing to kill him with. No shells for the gun.
How far up the tree was he?
No, not. He was probably about, 20 feet, I expect, up in the tree. And he had gone out on a limb, and there was a forks in the limb like so. And he's had his left front and hind foot on this limb, his right front foot on this limb, and his right hind foot was broken. That's where the shot had hit him.
Okay.
See, a bear don't run this way. They run this way.
Oh, okay.
And evidently when I shot, the right hip, the right leg had been back, and the bullet had just passed right in back and had hit the right hip and just shattered the hip. So that right hind foot
was hanging limp?
Was just hanging down limp in between the forks, see? Well, I thought to myself, now this is dumb, Jack. I
didn't say that now.
But it's the truth. And I had on these suspenders. And I thought to myself, the only thing I can do is try to make a loop out of them suspenders. And if I can get up there and get that around that bear and hang him, I'll just take a club and beat him to death. Jack, I took off my suspenders.
Okay.
And you know they're shorter here in the back.
Yeah.
And I tied that together, and I stretched them. And I thought, preacher, that'll never work. Now you know you can't do that. And I really needed them, Jack. Because my honey pants too big for me anyhow. You know, I have a lot of trouble getting clothes. So I take those suspenders and put them back on. And then I remember that dog chain. And on Monday, when we had led the two beagles, we just used baler twine. See, easy to wad up and put in your pocket. I had two pieces of that baler twine in my pocket. So I took the chain and the baler twine and skinned up that tree. I went up, Jack, and this limb is only about that big around that goes out and then forks.
Yeah.
Just like I was explaining to you. Right here goes another limb out. Just made a perfect handhold.
Yeah.
And so I'm easing up behind that bear.
In the tree with the bear.
In the tree with him.
With a wounded bear.
With the wounded bear. Dog, that's all.
All right.
And that bear was facing the other way. And when I come up behind him, I thought, now if I can just get that chain up over that broken foot that's hanging down, you see. And just about the time I got the baler twine tied to the limb, tied it to the end of the chain, see, that bear decided, I'm going to teach this preacher a lesson. I'm going to educate him. And that bear turned right around, Jack, and come right down that limb after me. And Jack, I'm backing up as fast as I can. and I had put on these heavy gloves now. Had heavy leather gloves.
Yeah.
I had put them on. And when that bear started down the limb, I started backing up. And Jack, I backed up to the main trunk of the tree.
Yeah.
And when I backed up there, I can't go no further.
Yeah.
And the God of heaven, and nobody else could do that, the God of heaven stopped that bear right there.
Oh.
I mean, he was reaching for me as I was backing up. And he was snapping at my hand. I had that heavy glove on, and he bit. And just fortunate for me that his teeth just break this enough to break the skin and into the glove. And I pulled my hand out of the glove. And he just dropped the glove then out of his mouth. Had his teeth and went behind here,
Tore your thumb.
where he would have really got a hold of me, I wouldn't be sitting here telling you this story right now. it would have all ended entirely different. I'll guarantee you. He'd have never let go, you see. I mean, Jack, he come to his mouth is right there, and I'm sucking my tummy in, and he stopped right there. Turned right around and went right back up that limb where he was. And only God could have stopped that bear right there. That bear was wounded, had every right and reason to tear me up.
Yeah.
And he just stopped right there. Turned right around and went back up the limb.
So you went down the tree and quit?
No, sir. Jack, yeah, I can't explain this to you. I really can't explain this. But I was obsessed with killing that bear. It never dawned on me to do anything else except try to kill that bear. Just an obsession.
Yeah.
That you got a bear, but you got to kill it, you see.
Yeah.
I went back up that limb and...
You went back out there again?
Yeah, took the chain, brought it over and snapped it onto this part of the chain, and that makes a lasso.
Yeah.
I went right back up and flipped the chain up on that broken leg and jerked it. And a bear's hind foot is a whole lot like ours. He's got a heel here and all, you see. Well, that's what I wanted. If I could have got it around that, I had it made. And what I had in mind was, of course, get the chain around the leg, and then get me a pole and knock him off the limb, and then just get down with a club and just...
wear him out.
That's right. That's what I thought I was going to do, Jack. The best laid plans of mice and men.
That's right.
And when I jerked it, I didn't get it behind the heel. It only got around this part of his foot. Well, I reached in under the limb to try to work the chain up. And I got a hold of that broken leg. And that bear was just a growling and cracking his teeth and trying to get turned around to take the second try at me. And I realized he's going to do it. And he was pulling, and I'm pulling on that broken leg. and it's just like, Jack, just like you and I sitting here. If I take your hand and you go pulling against me and I'm pulling against you, if I let go, which way you going? You're going over backwards.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. When I let go, then the bear lost his balance. And he dropped right down between the forks and caught on with his front paws. And he just hanging there only with his front paw. And I jump up and down the limb as far as I could, trying to jar him loose. And it worked. Down he went. And Jack, when he hit, of course, the end of the chain, that's on his hind foot, so his head just drops right on down. And he was just hanging there.
That's what you wanted.
That's what I wanted. But I knew it wasn't going to hold long because it didn't have the chain behind the ankle, see?
Yeah.
So I hurried up and jumped down out of the tree. And Jack Kincaid, when I hit the ground,
So did he?
that bear hit the ground right beside him. And old Dan raced right in and started circling. That held him for a minute, see? And I'm running around looking for a rock.
Yeah.
And I found myself a rock, and when I turned around, then to look at them again, right there went the bear down over the mountain, and at one time, there used to be a homestead back there, an old farm, and that's growed up now, but there's still some brush there. And that bear was going right down through that brush like, and Dan had run in and grabbed that broken leg. That broken leg is the closest thing to him, you see, because it's dangling back there. Right. Dan grabbed that broken leg, and that bear drug that dog right down through that thicket. And I'm running behind him, trying to catch up.
With a rock.
Dan, get him, Dan, sink him, Dan. And old Dan's holding on, boy, for dear life. And when that bear realized, Jack, I imagine that bear must have drugged Dan for at least 100 foot down over that mountain. And when the bear realized that Dan wasn't going to let go, the bear stopped, turned around to fight the dog. When he did, Dan just let go and jumped back. Well, that gave me a chance to catch up with him. And I landed into him with that big rock and caught him beside the head.
You hit him then,
And
okay.
yes, and it knocked him off of balance all right. But man, it just made him that much more. And after me, he cooked. And Jack, I'm running backwards, kicking anything in front of me in that bear's face, and trying to backpedal and get away from him, and yelling, "Get him, Dan! Get him!" And old
What
Dan
you were saying,
around.
help me, Dan, help me.
Old Dan run around, run right back in, and grab that broken leg again.
Yeah.
And when he grabbed that broken leg, that broke the bear's charge against me. The bear turned to fight the dog. Now, right in there I went back on a Saturday. Now, mind you, this is on Thursday, and on that side of the mountain there was no snow. But on Saturday, a 4-inch snow had fallen on Friday night.